So, what's up guys, we are back for another video, and today is going to be a bit different. As you can see, we are debating and really discussing the possibility of both Luke Kuechly and Mike Evans making the Hall of Fame, and obviously Mike Evans is still active while Luke retired a bit earlier than what a lot of people have expected, but this is a type of video, this is an ideal off-season video. It gets discussion, and you guys are probably going to comment your thoughts and everything, and I like to be as interactive with you guys as I possibly can, and this promotes exactly that. So we are going to be discussing and pointing out each side of, each guy's case for the Hall of Fame, why they should not be in, and everything of that nature. So before we dive into each player, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do, and it would be very much appreciated. Now let's begin. And we're going to start today's video with Luke Kuechly and discussing his case for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, when we discuss Luke and really anybody from this era of football, what we are going to start with and what we are going to say is this generation of football is going to be held to a lot different of a standard than previous generations, right? Now, more than likely, and what I mean by that is statistically, these guys are going to be a lot better than other Hall of Fame NFL greats. And an example of this is there's a good possibility Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford both finish with either very close or more passing touchdowns and passing yards than Dan Marino, for example. And no disrespect to those guys, because I like each of those guys a lot, but I don't think anybody that's, truly a fan of football is going to honestly say, you know what, I would take Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford over Dan Marino to start a franchise. And you see where I'm going with this, and it especially pertains to the wide receiver position, and a player like Antonio Brown, who had 6 or 7 straight 100-catch, 1,000-yard years. Obviously, his numbers are going to be very inflated when it comes to his time to be nominated for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, this generation statistically is going to be a lot better than a lot of other generations, especially on the offensive side of the football. But for Luke specifically, he was a very dominant linebacker, and a player that his career very favorably compares to, and we're discussing on the field only, not off the field comments or anything like that, is Brian Urlacher, who played for the Bears and was a member of the 2018 class of the Hall of Fame. Both guys started out in an NFC team that was not very good, and when Luke got there, he was a top 10 pick, and he took them, Cam Newton was also on the team, and so were a lot of other players, but he was a big reason why they went to the Super Bowl in 2015, and like Brian Urlacher, lost to a Peyton Manning-led team. So, these guys were each very dominant at what they did, and I'm sure when they lost their Super Bowl, both of them, Brian in 2006, Luke in 2015, I'm sure each of them were probably saying, you know what guys, think about how this feels right now, we're going to be back very soon. Unfortunately for both, neither of them made it back to the big game, and ultimately both of those guys finished without a Super Bowl ring. Now, Ryan, as we know, had a Hall of Fame career, and Luke, believe it or not, had more first-team All-Pros than Brian when it is 5-4, and Luke was a 2013 Defensive Player of the Year. And I know when we think of this generation of football, we think of the dominant defensive player, we think of Aaron Donald, who will very easily be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner, but what is kind of lost in that is Luke won a Defensive Player of the Year award back in 2013, and the way Luke's path was set up when he first started was he won the Rookie of the Year with over 160 tackles in 2012, and then in 2013 won the Defensive Player of the Year. Now, there was a little controversy to that back then because there were other players that were certainly worthy, but Luke did win before J.J. Watt had his big dominant run, and he was actually the player to win out of the years between when JJ went 3 for 4. JJ won in 2012, 14, and 15. Aaron Donald's won in 17, 18, and 20. And Luke won back in 2013. So Luke was the player to split it up, and Stephon Gilmore was the player to split Aaron Donald's up for what it's worth. But that goes without saying how impressive that is, as JJ Watt, like Aaron Donald, is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Luke was the only player in the NFL to split that up in terms of JJ's 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in 4 years. So, one big question that comes up a lot of the time in guys, Pro Football Hall of Fame nominations and resumes is longevity. And for Luke, that question kind of comes up because I don't want to say only played 8 years, because that's 8 more years than I'd ever play and I'd ever survive for that matter. But in terms of the Hall of Fame, it's a lot more, strict of what has to be done. But the thing that benefits Luke is he was a 7-time total All-Pro in 8 seasons. He did not make a first or second team only once. And for what it's worth, it's not like he was a one-time first-team All-Pro where he had just one solid year above the rest and was a 6-time second-team All-Pro. By the way, that would still be good, but Luke was a 5-time first-team All-Pro, so 5 times he was the best at his position. And if we're talking about Ray Lewis being the best inside linebacker of the 2000s, then I think Luke is definitely the best inside linebacker of the 2010s, and I don't think it's close either. And by the way, I'm talking about inside linebackers. I'm not including Von Miller in that, who has a Super Bowl MVP. We're not including Von inside of that, just to be clear. I don't want there to be controversy in terms of that. But Luke was a truly dominant force, as he had multiple seasons, really every year of his career above 100 tackles and multiple above 150, and he was the face of the Panthers defense through the entirety of the 2010s. And I don't think there's any question whether or not Luke is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and there shouldn't be. And what I do want to say benefits Luke is he is a very quiet, hard work guy, and a lot of the times, you see this with receivers, and we're going to discuss this when Mike Evans comes up, but receivers like Terrell Owens and Chris Carter, who are boisterous at times, to say the least, and, T.O. has been in his fair share of media, doing sit-ups on his, the front of his property, and then throwing the popcorn in his face on Thanksgiving Day, and, things of that nature. Well, just being honest, the pro football voters generally don't like that, and I know they're like the typical, oh, you can't have fun when you're playing and everything like that, and that's going to benefit Luke, is he was never a, look at me type guy. And for instance, Luke could have had a, Minneapolis Miracle type play, like a Stephon Diggs type play in his career, and he probably would have just been, expected. He probably just would have been yeah, cool, we won a game, right? So that's going to benefit Luke when it comes down to it, and given that he is a 5-time first-team All-Pro and was the best at his position for the entirety of the decade, I do think it is pretty clear that Luke should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer in the class of 2024. So now we discuss Mike Evans and his case for the Hall of Fame, and it's a lot more complicated than just, yep, he started off his NFL career with 7 straight 1,000-yard years, and let's just go ahead and toss him in. It's a lot more complicated than that, and obviously that's a great start to a career, but what I would like to ask, and I don't say this disrespectfully to Mike Evans because I think he is one of the best players or receivers from this era, but was there ever a time where Mike Evans was definitively the best receiver in the NFL? And the answer to that is no. And Mike's been in the league since 2014, and he wasn't the best receiver from his draft class for the first few years of his career, obviously with Odell Beckham being in that same draft class. Now, Mike's career at this point is more successful than Odell's. I think that is more than fair to say, but the first few years it was all about Odell, and Odell was really on a different level than Mike Evans ever has been in terms of his success and in terms of the player and the guy he is in media, right? And obviously we haven't even mentioned AB or Julio Jones yet. So there's never been a time where Mike has, in my opinion, honestly been a top 3 guy where you consistently could say, you know what, Mike Evans is without a doubt a top insert a number receiver, and that's going to hurt him eventually. At some point that's going to be said whenever everyone is debating in the room with David Baker and all of those guys. But what's going to benefit Mike is, I'm going to say, barring some unforeseen injury this year, he's going to have 8 straight 1,000-yard years. And Tom Brady saw and knows how good he is as a dominant force, and he can just chuck it up to him. A 50-50 ball with that big 6'5", 240-pound frame is more like an 85-15 ball or an 80-20 ball. Mike Evans just does not lose jump balls, and not only that, he's not just a jump ball receiver either. Let's just get that clear. Mike Evans is a very dominant player, but again, with players in this generation that are as good as receivers are, Mike hasn't been a top 3 player ever, and that's what's going to hurt him. But as we said at the beginning of the video, the stat-padded era, if you will, of the NFL is going to present a big challenge for NFL Hall of Fame debaters when those times come, when they're debating, for minutes on end of, this guy's career. But then you'll see players like Drew Pearson, who had, I want to say, less than 500 career catches, get in the Hall of Fame. And obviously Mike Evans' stats are going to be a lot better than any player from the 70s. That's just the way it's going to be. And his receivers' numbers are going to be a lot better than pretty much anybody prior to 2000, maybe aside from Jerry Rice, Chris Carter, and Steve Largent. But again, the eras are going to largely determine, how many guys are we going to put in the Hall? Because it doesn't stop at the receiver position for just Mike Evans. As we said, Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford, do they pass the eye test for the Hall of Fame is very debatable, but they will 100% pass the numbers test, and it's going to be the exact same way with Mike Evans, and that's why this, debate for him is so critical and why it is so hard to determine whether or not Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. Now, as we wrap up today's video, I do want to say that Mike has over 530 catches, over 8,200 yards, and over 60 touchdowns, and is only 27 years old. And he's younger than Michael Thomas, by the way, so I don't know how you guys view their average age, but he is younger than Michael Thomas. But what I do want to say is, when it's all said and done, is Mike still probably has a good 6 to 7 years, and eventually the 1,000-yard streak is going to come to an end, whether it's due to him simply not getting as many targets, due to him being like 34 or 35 years old, or whatever, right? It's going to come to an end at some point. But what I'm going to say is, I would be surprised if Mike finishes his career with less than 800 catches and less than, probably 12,000 yards, and he's already at 60 touchdowns, so he's more than likely going to be a minimum at the 90-plus touchdown range, and if you get into the 100 range, you're in the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to be honest, I would be very surprised when it's all said and done if Mike Evans does not end up in Canton at the end of his pro football career. Now, with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I really enjoyed this type of video, so if there's anybody, I went with the NFC South today, so if there's anybody else you would want me to talk about, not necessarily from just this division, but from anywhere else, let me know. And as I said, I try to be as interactive with you guys as we can. We are approaching 24,000 subscribers quickly, and you guys are awesome and amazing for that. So until next time, have a great day. Love you guys. Deuces.